Hello, I'm Diane Hinchcliffe, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Welcome to Episode 3 of Constellation TV, the enterprise tech show where Constellation's research team shares the latest news, trends, and features on the enterprise. My coverage area is about the future of work, CIOs, and things like IoT. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Steve.
Thanks, Diane. Steve Wilson here from Sydney. We're at summer already. We've had a great holiday. I hope everybody's safe and sound all around the world. My coverage area as a VP and Principal Analyst is digital safety and privacy. It's a pretty broad portfolio, and luckily I'm supplemented by mega brains like Liz Miller and Nicole France. Nicole and Liz are going to join us later on in Block D of this show for a bit of a debate about what's hot. So in all of these episodes, you're going to hear from we analysts. We're going to invite business transformation leaders from time to time, the cutting edge vendors that Constellation works with, and all of the other influencers.
Exactly right, Steve. So we've got an exciting show for you, and we'll run down some of the top industry news in the A block.
And then back to Diane, who's been spending a lot of time, as you probably know, if you've been following along at home, with the Citrix Airstream, having an adventure on the road. So we'll get the latest from Diane.
And then we'll have our industry colleague Holger talking about tech pronunciation. And then be sure to stick around as Constellation analysts are going to go deep into some of the news areas on privacy, cybersecurity, and the regulatory climate for 2021. So let's dive right into A block. Steve, so what's new in your space recently? A lot of things have happened recently. I was wondering if you could talk to us maybe about SolarWinds. That's perhaps the biggest story that happened in 2020.
Yeah, sure thing, Diane. Wow. SolarWinds is all about complexity, which is one of the things that we deal with all the time. So a real quick recap, SolarWinds is a software provider, enterprise software solutions, complicated piece of software with supply chain issues. A lot of people thought that this was supply chain application, but it's actually, we're talking about the supply chain of software itself, the different modules that go into building the stuff that you just take for granted running on your computers at work. There was a breach. It meant that we think it's a nation state actor had managed to get into systems in the government, in Microsoft, and to start exfiltrating, which is tech talk for sucking data out, sucking out personal data of customers, and maybe it's industrial espionage. But I think that Liz and I are going to kick this around later. Lots of lessons around complexity and how the hell do we deal with security when things are so messy.
And this was a breach inside the tools we actually use to secure our IT systems. Is that right? Exactly right.
We always think about breaches occurring like at the endpoint, like malware getting in, or people being clumsy with their USB sticks and those sorts of social engineering attacks where you trick somebody into giving you your password. But this is much more insidious. This is about malware way up the supply chain in the code that nobody ever looks at.
Well, and I heard SolarWinds has been trying to contain the scope of the breach, but it looks like it's very wide. Even is this the breach where Microsoft actually believes that some of their core source code was viewed?
Yeah, that's the one. The ramifications, we're still trying to work this out. It's curious, a lot of this is good luck that we found out about this, and Liz has got some news about that later on.
So I talk a lot about complexity management, Steve. And all these this combinatorics and these thousands of systems we have. What do you recommend that people do when we're faced with breaches of this scope?
Well, we need to have business continuity plans. We need to have disaster response where people like Microsoft is doing, isolate, put virtual boundaries around what's going on and try to isolate the affected systems. But I'm trying to work on prevention as much as cure, and like you said, Diane, with combinatorics and new analytical tools to understand complexity, we need to do much more in the design time, don't you reckon? At design time to prevent this sort of thing.
Well,
you must see parallels in your
architect. I know you can't bake cybersecurity in the good practices after you've architected a system. You got to do it from the beginning, right? So
that's it.
So Steve, talk to us about the other big news these days. Google's been encountering a growing set of antitrust obstacles in the industry, both at the federal and the state level. Can you walk us through what they're facing, and what does it mean for organizations?
Well, You read the headlines and a lot of things are happening at the same time. We've got Apple and Facebook facing off, pardon the pun, taking the moral high ground on issues in their app stores. The Google thing can be seen through a number of different lenses, and we actually talked about this on a recent TV episode about whether this is a privacy issue or something else. It's all sorts of things, and what interests me at the moment is that I think that we're looking at the opening moves. You know, I guess we're all watching Queen's Gambit over the holidays, right? This is like the opening move in a very complicated chess game between regulators and data companies, and I think what we're seeing here is recognition that data is the most important defining asset of the future economy, and as such, market regulators are taking a really keen interest on monopolies. So that's how I look at this. All of the analysts at Constellation are pretty different.
I mean, they're the main entry point into information online, right? They're the number one search engine. They reportedly spend $12 billion a year with Apple to be the default search engine on iOS devices.
Yeah, well.
You know, so they have an enormous amount of power and our data. And so is this a good thing? Do we need to do this? Or is Google being treated unfairly?
Controversial position, but my position is that I think this is broadly reasonable. But as I say, it's the opening move. We've got a long way to go in this fight. Yeah,
I think that, like you said, this is the opening salvo, and I think that Google has some explaining to do with some of the issues, and I think with others, they'll probably be litigating this for a very long time. So, Steve, how about if I go from my end, go through what I'm seeing for 2021? It's lining up to be quite an exciting year.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so right as we ended 2020, I surveyed a number of top CIOs in the industry around the world about what they're going to be facing in 2021. And what I'm about to say summarizes some of that, but we're also seeing a lot of recently emerging trends that I've incorporated here. So automation, robotic process automation, things like AI will be far and away the top driver of IT budget shifts this year. We're going to see lots of investment to capture growth opportunities, do more with less, create more value for the business. We're seeing a very COVID-driven take on digital transformation. Has become front and center the strategic goal of the CIO in 2021. That was one of the clearest signals from the survey. CIOs are investing because the workers have moved and their customers have moved. Enterprise low code is going big in 2021 because of that first point about automation, but it will start to consolidate faster. We're going to see more mergers and acquisitions, I think, in 2021, and shaky players are going to shake out. Cybersecurity, regulation, and privacy, Steve, for all the reasons we just talked about, will grow dramatically as a share of budget and attention, and it'll also delay some IT rollouts.
Yeah, and I think that the low code thing is really interesting for cybersecurity because low code only works again through this supply chain. Low code doesn't mean no code. There's still software in there. It's just that people aren't writing their own code. They're relying on other people to supply them with code. And we're beginning to understand the tools that CIOs and CISOs need to be able to deal with acquiring these things, you know, the questions that they need to ask.
Absolutely. And it's interesting is if you have everyone in your organization now doing low code, they're potentially creating more security holes. So IT needs to be the guardrails to ensure it is successful. Right?
Lucky security.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing IoT, edge, and AI on the edge is getting a huge boost from blossoming 5G services, which promises to bring a lot of new capabilities and performance at price points and performance we've never been seen before. But it's just promises now. We're going to see if, you know, by the end of this year, if they actually gets realized. We see new talent sourcing models. CIOs are desperate for all new types of talent, but they don't need them for very long. There's just so much more tech, but you don't need these as dedicated roles.
It's transient.
Yeah. Gig economy, on-demand talent bases, things like that are what they're looking at. Collaboration and digital workplace is going to continue to get major upgrades. We did big shifts in 2020 due to COVID. We're seeing, you know, this move to post-video meeting services, vertical collaboration tools that aim at marketing and you know, things like professional services, and mass collaboration solutions instead of just, you know, point-to-point collaboration. So all that's going to be a big shift. And I think it's going to be Google's make or break year in the cloud. Amazon and Azure are reaching peak industry dominance, and they may actually pull ahead from Google. So they've got to pull out and make things like Anthos really perform for them to convert enterprise clients.
It's a crazy idea, but I mean, given their antitrust and their monopoly battles that they're having at Google, you know, how much effort do you put into keeping that you know, winning that cloud?
Well, yeah, the capex. I mean, if you want to play that game, you got to spend tens of billions of dollars a year in capex to play the game, right? So we'll see. They've got the pockets to make it happen. I don't think they're going to give up next year, but I think we'll see the writing on the wall if they're going to, if they're going to make it. Alibaba is coming up close behind them, and others are too. So
yeah, we ain't seen nothing yet.
No, exactly. And then smaller categories, software categories, things like work coordination and RPA are now moving into becoming top level categories in things like ERP, CRM, and productivity suites. Like Adobe bought Workfront and put them into their creative suite, right? These things are happening. So that'll create major changes in the industry in its own right. And finally, I think the CIO is being forced to rethink and restructure IT for a fundamentally cloud-based, services-oriented IT that's entirely on demand, much more decentralized, and because their stakeholders are becoming more self-service, more self-supporting, more self-training,
working from home.
So it's going to be a big year in 2021, and these are just some of the changes. We're going to need a few more episodes of Constellation TV to actually cover all the things that are going to happen this year. So strap yourselves in. I think it's going to be exciting, but it's going to be white knuckle as well. So
you've hit the ground with a change of pace, obviously, Dion, and people who've been following along this Constellation TV as it evolves will know that you've actually been on the road, having some fun in the wild with your family in the Citrix Airstream facility, shall we say. So I don't know whether you want to give us any off-the-cuff comments about that, Dion. Welcome back. But now through the magic of pre-record, we're going to go now to a pre-recorded session from, I think this is the third and final installment from your trip.
It is.
Previously on the Future of Work reality show, my family and I spent time working remotely in an basically worked through a variety of logistical and technical challenges, including using a solution to ensure that I had enough bandwidth to work while the kids could still virtually attend school. Now it was time for me to try a new collaboration tool that would work better in this remote setting. So I sat down and thought about a cutting-edge solution I could bring to the situation.
So working digitally can be fatiguing. It can wear you out. You're staring at a screen all the time, right? So video is okay, but there are better ways of working. And so we're trying out here in the forest, with Citrix RV to try a number of new tools, new technologies, and I think the ones we've tried so far have actually worked quite well. And so we've tried some new meeting hardware. We've overcome a cybersecurity incident. We figured out how to use our bandwidth better. So so far so good. We'll try some new things, and we'll check in later.
So I went to my handy Constellation shortlist for digital canvas workboards. I figure these would potentially be a much better way of working on the road by providing a whiteboard-like experience for myself and my remote coworkers. And so I track 9 different solutions in the space, things like Coda, Dropbox Paper, Notion, Quip by Salesforce. But there was one in particular that I've always wanted to use and I thought would be a really good solution for this remote situation on the RV in the forest. And so the solution that I picked is known as Mural, which is getting very popular as a digital whiteboard that you can use collaboratively. And it's very much, as you can see here, I'm going to create a mural that I can then collaborate on how we're going to pick the folks for the Business Transformation 150 this year, which is a Constellation thing that we do annually. And so you can see me here using Mural to start that collaborative process. And I pulled people in from across the company, and we began to work on it. And Mural is a fantastic solution that allows you to bring text and sticky notes and images on an essentially infinite whiteboard, and then bring people together. And so this was a very effective solution that kind of replicated that in-office environment where you have this whiteboard and you have sticky notes and you can do workshops and collaborative sessions. And so that's what we ended up using.
Civilization advances when the formerly difficult gets easy, and remote work now is easier than it has ever been. We have the tools, we have the technologies, and we have the techniques to make life far more livable in 2021 and beyond. We just need a good vehicle to do it in, and this sure was one of them.
Great segment, Dion. Thank you. And now let's go to Holger for a pronunciation lesson.
Hi, this is Holger Müller from Constellation Research, talking about something which is near and dear to my heart, which is the proper pronunciation of European words. Obviously, I'm from Europe. I care for that a lot. You might have seen my digital exhaust in a fun and humor way. I kind of like have developed a reputation for pronunciation. How did that all start? I think it was a conversation that I had in the 90s with this gentleman, Klaus Tschira, one of the founders of SAP, less known. He told me about how he was presenting in the UK for the first time, thinking that SAP sounds rather very German and not perfect to talk about. So he thought, hey, I make SAP out of that. That sounds English enough to me. Didn't notice that some people in the audience were kind of like smiling, smirking, asked after that, what does SAP mean? Oh, and it means like a not so educated, stupid, I think, male guy from the countryside. So he said, from that on, I'm not going to change the words pronunciation anymore, and I'm going to look up what does SAP or SAP or making something together mean, potentially in a local country. So let's start with something easy, right? Global brands, right? Have you seen this cat before? It's not a puma, it's a puma, right? Easy to pronounce for English speakers. Let me spell it out for this P-O-O-M-O-M-A, sorry, P-O-O-M-A, puma, right? Easy to say. That's how the cat is being called in German, obviously. Not to be confused with Poma, which is the famous brand of ski slope preparation equipment, which is P-O-M-A, right? That's how you kind of like pronounce this. Let's move to something which is more exciting potentially than sports brands, which, right? What a nice Ferrari. No, it's not a Ferrari, it's a Ferrari. It's a schwa sound. The one thing that non-English speakers struggle the most with pronunciation with in the English language. So it's Ferrari, but it's not a Ferrari. It's not a Lamborghini. It's a Lamborghini. Correct. It's GH in the Lamborghini brand name, and that is a hard G, right? Like, hey, coincidence. In my first name, Holger, right? Some of you who try to show, hey, I learned some French, I try to pronounce the name in the French way. I make a whole jar out of it. Sorry, the Danish guys don't have soft G's. They only have hard G's, like all the Vikings have only hard stuff, right? So it's Holger. And if you want to be 100% correct, the French version of the Danish name Holger is Ogien. Hey, go figure out what the French do. Then, of course, there's a guy who makes me always look good no matter how my hair looks, right? You know this gentleman. This is Albert Einstein. Not Einstein, or even worse, Einstein, right? It's not double E at the end or something. He's not Dutch or something. No, born in Germany, one stone, Albert Einstein. That is particularly important if you want to make pronunciations around it in your branding and marketing, which is Salesforce with Einstein. So, Mark Benioff, when you listen to this, speak to your fellow executive, Alex Dayon. He pronounces perfectly. It's Einstein. But let's come to the biggest problem of all pronunciation issues, which is coming up very soon again in the World Wide Way. I don't know how they do it virtually. It's Klaus Schwab's event in a little town in Switzerland called Davos. No, not Davos. It's Davos. The pronunciation is in the second syllable. Davos. It's kind of like appalling that everybody goes there and doesn't even care to speak to locals. Hey, how do you pronounce your town? Which is my tip for you for 2021, if you're able to travel again. Talk to the locals who drive you around, serve you food, cook you food, make your rooms, or whatever you're doing, right? Get you into the events. How do you pronounce your local town? And you notice, hey, I'm not in Rome. I'm in Roma. I'm not in Milan. I'm in Milano. I'm not in Hamburg, but in Hamburg. I'm not in Munich, but in München. So ask the locals how to pronounce their name. This is Holger Müller from Constellation Research. You see that I care for pronunciation. I have a reputation for pronunciation. Looking forward to hear from you in 2021 and wishing you all the best.
Hey, thanks, Holger. That was as clear as mud. But I think we're going to have as much clarity as we possibly can on European language. Welcome back, Dion. Liz Miller, Nicole France are joining us now to kick around some of those deeper issues around antitrust, monopoly, and SolarWinds. Liz, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I wish everyone would stop breaking into each other's stuff. It would kind of make my life a little bit easier, but probably a little less fun.
Yeah, the myth is that the analysts love this stuff, but we don't.
No, because it always means something bad has happened. And so yeah. I think, especially Steve, because our coverage areas intersect so much with digital privacy and safety and things like security, Something like SolarWinds, I think, rocks everyone to their core. So it kind of sits at the heart of everything that I do. And then, of course, it has ramifications all the way into everything that Nicole does, right? Because it then spews out over this whole big world we call experience.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge there is that we're talking about one of those really insidious kinds of situations where we still don't really know all the ramifications. And I certainly leave that to you, particularly Liz, to talk us through what we know so far. But
what the heck happened?
Talking about experiences, I mean, this is one of those areas where we have yet to understand not just what the full implications are, but really what the effects are going to be going longer term. And that is very difficult to plan for and mitigate. So we at least have an opportunity to consider what we ought to be worried about, I guess, at this point, right?
Yeah, and this to me is actually parallel to some of the other complexities that we have. The trade interconnectedness that we have, the financial system interconnectedness. This issue is playing out all the time. As Diane said at the top of the show, complexity and combinatorics are actually on the leading edge of business. Look at one of the ramifications of COVID, of course, is that people have understood their exposure that they have in traditional supply chains and traditional trade chains to different parts of the world. And, finally, our chickens are coming home to roost because we've built computers that are so complicated. The same interconnectedness is bringing down things and making SolarWinds possible.
Well, I think that the most fascinating things, at least for me, on the entire SolarWinds issue is the fact that it was a supply chain attack. Supply chain attacks, I don't think it can be stated enough, are exceedingly rare because they're really hard to pull off. This isn't like I just slipped in some malicious code, someone opened up an email. These are well-planned, well-funded, strategically thought-out attacks. And for this specific code, the malware wasn't located in the source code. It was actually located in an update. So if you were a SolarWinds customer and actually going in and downloading the solution for the first time, you were not getting exposed to the malware. It's when you went in for the update. So that's how they know it was only 18,000 of 300,000 customers who were affected. But it was
people are doing what they're supposed to do. Like number one advice that we give people is keep your systems patched.
Exactly. Update, right? So they were able to insert this code into an update, and the code, the update itself was actually so sophisticated, it had its own legitimate documentation. It had all of the certs, it had all of it had all the coding that to any system that it encountered, including some of the top security solutions in the world, like FireEye and Microsoft, it did not hit their systems. It lay in wait for months. Yeah. And that's what's so interesting.
I think it brings up a big question is when you say that they actually had the certs, that means that they were able to prove that this code actually came from SolarWinds. So is this a problem in the handling and in the processes, or is this a problem with the fundamental technology itself?
That's the amazing thing about this attack. It actually had its own certification. It had all of the digital footprint any update was supposed to have. It looked and felt legitimate to the vast majority of systems. The way it was caught, MFA, right? So FireEye actually had a device that was the espionage team, the kind of the group
MFA, Liz?
Oh, sorry, multi-factor authentication.
Again, something that we're supposed to use.
Get excited. But they had a device they were actually trying to bring onto the system. Another listening post that they were essentially trying to bring on onto FireEye to actually listen in on FireEye. And that's when they got caught. And FireEye identified the breach. They reverse engineered what had happened. And that's how they found the malicious code. And then FireEye immediately started working with GoDaddy and with Microsoft and immediately took what is essentially a malicious URL that was hosting the code down. And they've now been able to reverse engineer a lot of the URLs and a lot of the organizations that have been impacted by this. But it's significant.
What's happening around the C-suite? The CIO is under tremendous pressure to go faster and faster. Friction is the worst thing. The CISO is trying not to be the Department of No. Security is classically, the handbrake, but handbrakes are actually, or brakes are what allow racing cars to go fast. It is, it's about safety. And what's the conversation, do you think, of the C-suite? How do we balance out speed and agility? And
there's a real desire to scale and automate security, such that you have 10,000 unblinking eyes. You have dynamic AI that are fighting attacks without human intervention. I mean, that's the dream, is to say, I want to scale up and automate cybersecurity so that we can handle however big an attack and however many combinatorics that there is. So why don't we fight fire with fire? But we are pretty far from that situation. And then there's the big trend towards zero trust, saying that we need to go back and recertify every piece of IT we have so that we deeply trust it. And we can operate more effectively. That is a very big paradigm change. It's inevitable, if you ask me, because of the number of incidents that we're having. We've got to go back and kind of zero base everything we have. But it's an enormous task. It's like digital transformation going to take us the next 5 or 10 years.
I'm going to be the wet blanket. I'm just going to be the wet blanket on what you said, Diane. And you know I love you, but I'm going to be the wet blanket.
Absolutely.
Here's the problem. Everyone wants to get this massive scale of security. So we went out and over-tooled ourselves all throughout 2020. And so now we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of alerts hitting hundreds of analysts, and it's not working. So the problem here is that we've tried to almost over-automate the problem without really understanding that when we all shift to this zero trust world, it's not tools, it's not even just process that has to change. Fundamentally, the behavior, the culture of the organization has to adopt that zero trust mindset. We live in a world where 70% of SOC employees have zero visibility into IT systems. So 70% of security operations centers teams have no visibility into what's happening in IT.
I can't help but see the parallels here to what we're seeing happening with things like customer data and understanding how to interact with customers. No, it's not a perfect analogy, but realistically, we've got a similar set of problems. We've got a massive, massive amount of data. We've got a proliferation of systems and tools, and as you say, Liz, alerts. And it really comes down to having to have the right constructs and the right frameworks, ask the right questions so that we can actually use all of this information effectively. And it's not the proliferation of tools and systems and data that's going to get us out of this problem. It's really having the right constructs to think about how to approach and understand the problem to use all those resources effectively, whether we're talking about customers and customer experience or we're talking about security.
Yep, it's quality, not quantity, Nicole.
And believe me, customers and security, they are going to have a massive clash in 2021, right? Because you've got people who now understand, hey, wait a minute, what did Google say that they weren't going to do with my data that they did with my data, and then blamed it on a glitch that did something with my data?
Yeah, and technology does not outrun the basics of business, which is about making promises to your clients. And if you break those promises, some good old-fashioned regulators that are 100 years old are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. And that's what we're seeing. I think the theme of 2021 is going to be this: the early stages of this game. If data is the most important asset, then people are going to be held accountable for what they do with that asset, and the consequences of how they make money out of it. So bring on 2021. It's going to be fantastic.
At least they're going to get curmudgeon analysts shouting at them on Twitter about stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Security and communities and data and privacy.
All of it now.
But yeah, Diane, to your earlier point, this is very much around managing complexity. It's very much around trying to find the balance, as you were raising, Steve, between the ability to move quickly and to adapt rapidly to change, but also to ensure that we've got some sort of security controls, not just in the cybersecurity sense.
Think about it. The most important tool is up here, and it doesn't work at light speed. It takes some time.
And I think it's also proven that you need to have that plan. You need to have that response plan. And I think a lot of organizations that were, especially, because you got to remember, SolarWinds, we had a foreign actor that was going in and looking at data in our school systems, in the Treasury Department, in the Defense Department. These were very intentional acts of espionage and listening, right? There was not a whole lot of exfiltration. They haven't seen a whole lot of organizations note that there was exfiltration of data, but this was a whole lot of listening. This was a whole lot of going in and just poking around at code like they did with Microsoft. So I think that the reality here is once everyone found out about it, there were more organizations that didn't know what to do. And it was like, just pull that stuff off. Let's go. Like we gotta have that plan. And if there's one thing everyone needs to do in 2021, go write your security response plan and include everyone in the C-suite in it. It is not just a security and IT issue. Everybody has to go grab a shovel.
Yep. Amen.
Yep.
Amen, Liz. Well said. Hey, Happy New Year, folks. This has been a not an entirely happy way of kicking off the year. We've got a little bit of doom and gloom and a lot of sort of regulators breathing down our necks. But hey, it's important, it's complicated, and I hope that we're helping. Right, this part. Cheers, everybody. Bye. Okay, well, that's a wrap for episode 3 of Constellation TV. We've got a hell of a lot to look forward to in episode 4. I'm looking forward to it. Dion.
Me too, Steve. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at ConstellationR, and on LinkedIn, and follow the hashtag CRTV. Episodes for Constellation TV air bi-weekly on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. PT.
Cheers, everybody.
Take care.
They got caught by MFA. They actually got caught by FireEye's MFA. So one of the devices that they were looking to bring onto FireEye's system actually was a stolen device, and it had an outdated cert. So it actually immediately sparked an alert. And that's when they went in and re-engineered.
Liz, you're geeking out. Back a bit, MFA, certs.
Yep, hang on just a second. Well, as Ray resplices this, Ray can also resplice the wonder of...
But I was enjoying the solar wind that was coming through your window there.
Yeah, there was like, woo, okay. So we'll back up and we'll say...
Let's do it again with just Steve. So have Steve as the only one on that one, Al. We'll do it one more time.
Again? Wow. How's that blooper
Just
roll?
Steve only. Without me, and just I'm gonna take Diane out. I'm gonna take myself out, Al.
Ah, peace at last. Great.